host of CPSP Chaplaincy Alive. Today we have with us Dr. Jim Rigby of the St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Austin, Texas. On his Facebook page, Dr. Rigby has a quote from John Keats, "Love is my religion." Dr. Rigby's demonstration of that is the sanctuary city he has helped to create within the walls of his church there in Austin. Here is Dr. Rigby.
I want to do, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. We, many of us in CPSP have read the articles about what you're doing in terms of giving a sanctuary to people who may face deportation or worse. And I was wondering if you would talk to us a little bit about the whole thing. Start at the beginning.
Well, I mean, the beginning for us was when a Guatemalan family explained to us that they were in danger of being deported back to Guatemala, and it was a mother and her son. What a lot of people don't realize is when you flee violence from another country and you come to the United States asking for amnesty, you're already considered a criminal. So this mother and her son were put in a for-profit prison for 11 months. By the time Ivan got to us, he had spent about a tenth of his life in prison. He was, had still not had not been out of school basically, hadn't had really a chance to learn English. So people don't realize that the history begins. It doesn't begin when they come to us. It's when our nation went to their nation and destabilized the country for economic reasons, and it turned it into a living hell. And Ilda and Ivan were born into that situation. So eventually they fled, and us being a church, it's like what you do is, I mean, that's as basic to the message as anything. That when the sojourner, when the wanderer, when the immigrant comes to you, you offer them hospitality. So our church took them in, set up a room for them to live in. They can use our kitchen, they can use our showers and this kind of thing. So
I am stunned to hear that when they come here, they are considered criminals. I doubt very many people in America know that that's true.
And that's part of the rhetoric. It's like they say we're only going to deport criminals. Well, if not being documented is a crime, then it's completely arbitrary in terms of who they decide to ship away. And certainly violent criminals, everybody agrees that should be dealt with. But when a nation destabilizes another country, it feels to me like if they're sane, they take responsibility for that. And most Americans I know don't want to learn the history.
No.
So these poor, and they act like when these poor people come across our boundary, they've somehow invaded us, whereas the fact is we invaded them.
How do you give them sanctuary in your church? What's the legal, how does that work exactly?
Well, I don't know that it will work, but what it's doing is a tradition not to invade churches. It's as much from a PR vantage point as anything, but that churches in the United States have been considered sanctuary. So government agencies, this particularly happened in the 80s, again, under those assaults on Central America. There were very courageous churches.
Yes.
And they were willing to risk going to prison. Some of them faced that. And what they did was build a network. And all we're doing is walking in their footprints. I mean, they laid out what needs to happen. So there are churches around the country that have come together, and temples. And I mean, this is way bigger than the church. I mean, this is communities, humanist communities that realize that if you're a human being, that has to be your first obligation. Not to act out unjust laws, but to be a human being.
I think a lot of people have become really more interested in history and what's happening in the world around them since this election. And I think they are wanting to hear from somebody. And that's why I was excited to have you on. It sounds like you have a lot of ideas about how to pull together and how to do what we can for the folks who are at risk.
Right. Well, it seems to me we've only got one door left, and it's the door we should have gone through in the first place, I think. But it's putting people ahead of property. And that doesn't seem like a radical idea, but our culture is built on property rights over human rights. And that's going to lead to the kind of administration we have now every time. And we try to act like this is some kind of big surprise that we didn't see this coming. But if you say that science is negotiable, that if you don't like a scientific study, then you can just ignore it. If you think that you can blame all of your problems on people who had nothing to do with it, eventually you wind up where we are now. And the silver lining in all this, I think, is that it's the people movements that got us our rights in the first place. And we've neglected it. The labor movement, the fact that we work 40 hours a week, that wasn't given to us by business. That was people on the streets risking their lives to do it. And we just have to get back in the streets. The church has got to realize that we're absolute hypocrites if we don't try to make it on earth as it is in heaven. And every different religion has a different way of saying that. But you can't talk about love and then promote injustice. I mean, justice is love that's applied to everybody, and it goes across boundaries.
So are you going to jails and talking to these folks? Are they coming to you? How is it working? Well, they're there, right?
Texas is just a judge ruled that the detention centers, what had happened in Texas is our administration is so brutal that what they did was disguise these detention camps as children care centers. They got them certified. So a judge said they're not that, they're jails, and you have children in these jails, so you've got to shut them down. So then that released a wave of people now. So what I think the next step is to try to get homes, get food, get transportation. We are seen as civilly disobedient in Texas, but Texas is disobeying the Geneva Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So what we're doing is saying that the international law needs to be obeyed too. And that people fleeing violence have a right to sanctuary.
I'm wondering, are there federal remedies? Is that what you're talking about, like federal remedies in court that you're seeking to overturn the state laws in this?
Well, I don't see that coming down the pike in the next at least 4 years. I'm not a psychic, but I think I don't see that in the cards. But I do think if people can return back to the streets, where if you protest Bush but you don't protest Obama, then what you've done is set up you don't have a scale that you're measuring by. So what both parties have to do, the people of goodwill have to say, we're going to measure with one scale. And right now, government isn't doing that. But we're back in the place where Martin Luther King was, back in the place where Gandhi was. These are not uncharted paths. Most of the world is disenfranchised. We are rejoining the human race. And I don't think that in itself is a tragedy. I think for us to get off our high horse as Americans and stop thinking we're the exception to every rule in the world might be a salvific event.
And how does it feel to be preaching that message?
Well, I mean, I've been preaching it for decades, so.
I see that. I read that. But what I'm asking is, are people coming to you and agreeing with that? Are you getting a lot of help?
More and more. I mean, when I first started doing these kinds of things, then it was like threats and a bomb threat. But now it's like every other bridge is burning. You know, it's like at some point you've got to say, okay, I may not like it, but you know, you have to join the human race. I mean, this is not ethereal theology. It's saying, you know, you've got to have an earth, so you've got to protect the planet, and human beings are not born to be serfs versus masters. It's like, you know, there has to be some kind of a universal standard for things, which means you have to radically revamp the economy.
So you're saying a movement in the streets. Are you meeting with folks around things like that?
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, things have popped up in the last decade that I think are really reminiscent of the movements that got us the rights that we have. So when Fight for 15, Black Lives Matter, I mean, look at Standing Rock.
Yeah.
If you want a template of what a human being looks like, you and I are sitting passively by while we're being poisoned and our grandchildren are being strangled. I mean, literally, we are passive in the face of slaughter. And people with a whole lot less power than we have, a whole lot less privilege, have said that's not going to happen. And they won, even if it's not a permanent victory. They were prophets for the human spirit. You know, and at some level, everybody can feel it. If we will all do that to the best that we can, that will wake up humanity, because underneath all of this horror are human beings, and they're frightened, and their worldview doesn't work anymore. So what some people are saying is go back to the past. Let's strengthen national boundaries. Well, that's insane. The economy's not national. Multinational corporations run our government. They are not Americans. I mean, they may have been born in America, but they're certainly willing to sell us out. So what we've got to do is realize we have an allegiance to humankind, not to artificial boundaries. And that will save us. That will get us out of the trap, because it's a contradiction in terms to think you can have a system of complete greed and it's going to somehow self-organize into a world that's habitable.
How do you keep your passion so raw, so real like that?
Well, when people trying to eat your toes, it keeps you, you know, it's like seeing the damage. I mean, it's in Texas, I stay up at nights thinking about women who are not going to be able to get health care, are going to have to travel, risk danger. I think of workers who work under unsafe conditions. Texas is the death capital for construction workers. And, you know, that's just an abomination. It's like none of us should be sleeping while that's going on. But it's so exciting because the people you meet are so wonderful. And that's what one of my favorite sayings from the life of activism, and I say it too much probably, but it's that there are only two rewards of the life of an activist: loving friends and living dreams. And to me, that's the food of the soul. That's what keeps the heart alive. And everything else is kind of marginal, you know, to that. So to have something worth living for is an incredible gift.
Every weekend at the hospital where I work, we have so many young African-American men shot and killed, brought into the emergency room. It's just gotten worse in the past months. And instead of becoming passionate, I feel myself getting demoralized. And I know a lot of chaplains I talk to, it's just slaughter and poverty. I work at a hospital where there is a lot of poverty. And I love the passion. I ask you, how do you keep it going? Because it can get overwhelming where you feel like, you know, you're useless and hopeless. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of tell us what to do. Tell us, how do we fit into this? How do we make this better?
I think that you are on the front lines of the struggle. And when you're on the front lines, it feels like you're losing all the time.
Yes.
When somebody's lagging behind you, they get to enjoy the victories. But when you're on the crest of the wave at the wound itself, which is where you are and where other chaplains are, You are doing sacred work. You know what I'm saying? And you have to look in the eyes of the people who you are giving hope to. You know what I'm saying?
I feel like you're doing it one person at a time, and it's something I want to get in the streets. You know, finally, I think we're all pushed to the point that we want to do something more. We want to see change. Yeah.
It is both, though. And
yes.
It doesn't happen without both. It doesn't happen without the one-on-one. It's much harder work that you do. So if people can give themselves credit for that and not feel like they're disengaged, because without the heart piece, you don't get to the justice piece. And this is a nation that has lost its ability to feel with the heart. And you are right there in that wound. And that's all the rest of us will have to work with in terms of being activists. If people don't feel empathy, they're not going to care about immigrants. They're not going to care about anybody. So please know that, from my tradition, I'm a Christian. So the person on the cross symbolizes how much it hurts to love. You know what I'm saying? And other religions have different ways of saying that. So, I'm not pretending we have any kind of copyright on that, because there are lots of religions and non-religions. They're every bit as loving, every bit as wise. But they all have a symbol of the fact that when you love another person, it's not like a light bulb shining a light. It's you are giving a piece of it. You're bleeding for other people. I think that's, again, in my tradition, communion. It's like you're giving your flesh and your blood. It hurts. You are suffering for other people. But that's such a gift, and that's such a noble thing. If you realize it.
It is. You feel honored to be there. You feel blessed to be there. It's just that over and over again, you start to wonder, isn't there more I should be doing? Isn't there something more I need to be doing? And I love your call to organize, and to all of us who care. Yes. All of the people who are listening to this are in this work, not for the money, I can assure you, but because they care and because they're in it. And they want change as much as anyone. And when you look at the families involved, I was thinking just this weekend of the 100 of people who are grieving and standing. There have to be thousands upon thousands of people who, in their loss, want change out there.
But realize that what you do in many ways is harder than what I do. I was a chaplain for a year and a half as a part of my training. And that's tough work. I could not do what I do now if I were exhausted from being present with people all day long as you do. So I think it's a combination of both, and we have to do both kind of things, but give yourself credit for the fact that I could not do what I do if the healing weren't taking place.
Talk to me a little bit about what the church can do about all of the talk about making people sign up because of their religion in America, making people register. Yeah. What can the churches do? Have you thought about?
Yeah, we can register as Muslims.
Oh, really? Yeah. I had read something about that.
And they're Jewish people. They're talking about the same humanists, atheists. It's like if we all, when they target any one group, if we all identify as that group, it's over. As soon as we have solidarity, we win. But as long as we're divided among ourselves, then we're all minorities. You understand what I'm saying? But as soon as we say, none of us, if it's Black Lives Matter, I'm there. If it's Standing Rock, I'm there. If it's a mosque that's being, and the head of the Defamation League, a Jewish guy, said, I'm a proud Jew, but on the day they set up that register, I will register as a Muslim. That's it. That's the victory right there.
I think a lot of people across America are afraid. I have a friend who was talking about her child saying, what are we going to do? Mom, I don't think our president likes Black people. What are we going to do? I think a lot of people are afraid.
It is. It's a terrifying time.
So, yeah, signing up or registering as a Muslim may be something that is frightening and puts you right in the middle of the target.
And I think if somebody's already targeted, to me, I was born into privilege. I'm white, male, heterosexual. I could add more things to the list, but the point is, It's people like me that have to take the risk. If you're already threatened, then that's not your business. I mean, it's good when we can stand up for each other. But if you're a Black parent, keeping your kids alive may be the best thing you can do. It's like we all have to see what we can do. But for people of privilege to lay it down right now, I think is absolutely critical.
How does it feel to have your church's support in all of this? It must feel incredible.
Oh, it does. And it's not about me. It's like, when I first started doing it, these were my issues and things. But at this point, if I don't get out of the way, they're going to do it anyway. I get so much credit for stuff, and some of it, I'm finding out at that time that something has happened, because it's people want to do this. And when there's a place where that's possible, then it's going to happen. And it is amazing. It's like to be in a room with no scapegoats makes us all safe. You understand what I'm saying? As long as, and Christian theology has been built around scapegoats. And if you don't correct that, and a lot of religions have, because it's a whole lot easier to do that than to live the life that they all call us to, of compassion and love and things. So, I think that's the loving friends, living dreams. It's like when you have a community, and I think we need communities. I really do. Religion, you can take it or leave it, but I think community is incredibly important.
I read one of your articles that said there was no hero coming. We're all looking for a hero to vote for president, and there was never a hero coming. It's too big. It's too much.
And a democracy can't be saved. We talk about freedom, but you can't have freedom if you have leaders. You know what I'm saying? It's like we have this contradiction in the American psyche, that we want a democracy, but we want to have heroes. We want it to be where if you criticize what Hillary did or Bush did, then that hurts their feelings. So we can't think critically about government. That's what I'm catching now. For decades, the Republicans were nailing me, and now that the Democrats lost the election, I'm saying, well, we got to see what we're doing wrong, right? We have to see where we have sold out. And it's like, it's the same thing. It's like professional wrestling, right? The good wrestler, the bad wrestler, and they're both doing the same thing. There's a huge difference to me between the two parties, but you've got to get beyond this economic system. You've got to get beyond militarism. You've got to get, I didn't choose it. I fought against it, but I think this is maybe the only door that'll save us anyway, which is to give up on the heroes and take responsibility to be a citizen, because you can't have a good leader if you don't have good citizens.
Are you going to go on some national tour and organize us and get us all into the streets? And
you don't want me organizing. I'm not that organized, but I think it's happening around the country. It's like if we can just network, and again, it's to change that idea that we need a leader, a hero to do this, because people movements are about all of us, and they come from the grassroots up. And I think if we can just think that way. I have nothing to offer Standing Rock except for my support. They don't need they don't need me to do any organizing or the labor, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But I support them, and I think it's happening. I think people are coming together.
Maybe it took this, like you said, to bring us all to some kind of consciousness that we need to get involved. Each one of us needs to be more involved.
It's people movements, it's both the electing good people, but also people completely outside that system, environmentalists, right? When they appoint people who aren't environmental activists, that's not as good as having actual activists, scientists, this kind of thing, that are pushing the envelope. So putting both those together, having both, for both parties. Both parties have fractured, which is not that bad of a thing. We need
yes,
within the system and without the system.
Thank you very much for your time. Oh, please.
Can I respond to the question?
Yes, please.
As far as what I would like to say to the chaplains, I'd like to say thank you. And I would like to say that whatever heroes I have are teachers and social workers and chaplains and anybody who's willing to feel right now, because that's really hard to do. And when you have a nation that's fallen asleep, than the people who are willing to keep their heart open, as much as that costs them, as much pain as that brings into their psyche. Please know that you are healing the world. At Christmas, that happens at the winter solstice, and religions all around the world say that, when you've got Herod that's in charge and this little baby is born in the manger, the fact that it happens at the solstice says that in the darkest times, what you're seeing is the death of one worldview and the birth of a new one. And that's where we are right now, which is scary. It's painful. It's dangerous. But, it feels really good at Christmas. And if we can realize that when you are listening to somebody, when you're by somebody's bed and they're dying, you are changing the world. You know what I'm saying? That is the work.
And it feels really good to hear from you at this time too. Thank you. I didn't want you having to hold me up or hold chaplains up. I wanted to thank you for inspiring us and for giving us something to look to and to do ourselves and to go forward. I really so appreciate your stand.
My work is a lot easier than yours on the heart. So I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.